Today we're going to talk about the knit stitch. The knit stitch is the most basic stitch, and it's going to take you from not being able to knit to being able to knit a whole wealth of things. That stitch is the primary stitch in most projects. You will need that stitch from here on out in your knitting career. The next stitch for the next video will be the purl stitch, and with those two stitches together, that is going to make up the majority of your knitting. And once you have those two stitches mastered and memorized, which won't be hard because you do them quite a bit, you'll repeat them and repeat them, you'll be able to get into the more complicated stitches, because really the more complicated stitches are just another way or a manipulation of doing the two basic stitches, which are knit and purl. Before we get into the technicalities of the knit stitch, I wanted to show you what to expect and what they might look like when you are actually knitting your project on a finished piece, because you probably, if you're not familiar, don't know what the two stitches look like in comparison. So I'd like to show you that today because it'll give you a better understanding of how the stitches come together. So first I just have this, actually it's a fingerless glove that I knitted yesterday, and it's not done because I don't have its partner, but I thought these would be great for driving. I found the pattern online. If you want the link, just let me know and I'll put the link in the below box to what the purl stitch looks like. When you are doing this stitch, when you see this V, that is going to be primarily utilizing the purl stitch. And I'm sure if you look at something that you are wearing or that you own, you're going to see that and you are going to think, wow, I didn't know I could make that. Now the knit stitch is a little bit more woven looking, and I have a little bit of the knit stitch here, but you can't really see it as well. It's in the ribbing. So this ribbing, which you'll learn to do, is really just a combination of knitting, which is this rougher woven looking, and then purling, which is the V. So the combination makes a nice stretchy rib. And I'll show you it in this because you can see it a lot better, is all of the stitches in this middle part between the two purl rows. So when you see this, this is what your knitting is going to look like. You'll be able to make this no problem even as a beginner, because you're just going to need the knit and purl stitch. And it only took me a couple hours or an hour or so to make. You'll be able to do that too. So if you're interested in learning the knit stitch, please keep watching. And we're back and ready with our needle that already has casted on stitches. So if you haven't casted on your stitches yet, please go to my other video, which is about casting on. So the first step was casting on. I've casted on here about 30 to maybe 25 stitches, enough to get me started on my other fingerless glove or mitt. And I think it's important to practice the knitting stitch for several lengths. So one row is when you've completed all of your knitting, knitting a stitch into all of your stitches. So that's one row. And then you'll have all of the stitches on this needle after you knit them. And so then you're going to switch hands again and you're going to knit into them, and that'll be row 2. And you'll keep going until you start to see some length, and it'll grow and grow and grow until you want to stop. But just practice by just doing several rows and see how far you go. So you begin with your needle in your left hand if you're right-handed, and this needle is full of stitches, and you're going to use the yarn that's still connected to the ball. Okay? Make sure you don't use your tail that you got from casting on. You can cut that off if it confuses you, but you're going to be using your feeding yarn, and you're going to take the other needle, the empty needle, in your right hand, and you're going to poke it through the first stitch, and it's going to go behind the needle on the left. Taking your yarn, you're just going to wrap it around the right needle that you've just poked through. Now you've created a sort of a line down between them In order to slip off this right needle, because you're going to want to slip it out now, you have to slip it over the yarn that you've just passed over, and it's going to poke through the hole, and as it's poking through the hole, you're going to slip this stitch that was now on the left needle. You're going to slip it off, and it's now on the right needle, but it's not just the stitch that you've slipped over. You've created a full stitch by wrapping that yarn around once. Now from this angle, you see that I have 3 stitches on my right needle. That was because I've just knitted into them. So from this angle, you're going to see me knit into the next stitch. So I'm taking my right needle and I'm sliding it into the 4th stitch, and you have them sort of in an X formation, and that is going to prepare you for wrapping the yarn around. So you're going to wrap the yarn around, going from the right to the left, and it's just going to slip in between them and sit there and ready for the next move. So as it's there seated in between them, I call it, it's kind of just sitting there in between them, you're going to take your right needle and slip it down through this stitch right here on the left needle. But in order to slip it down like that, you want to make sure you're catching your yarn that you're holding down. So you're going to pass the needle over the yarn as you go down into it through the front. And as you're going down into it through the front, now you have that stitch on your needle now. And so once you have that on your needle now, you can slip it off your left needle and you have a nice snug stitch. Pull it tight, not too tight, because then your knitting will be off a little bit. So just pull it nice and tight, but not too tight. And we'll try it again on the 5th stitch. So going in from the front to the back, creating that X, and taking your yarn that should be always feeding now. If it's connected to your right needle, it's going to be on your right needle always until you finish the row. So you're wrapping that yarn around, going from the right to around to the left, back to the right, between them, so that it's nice and snug between the two. And then you're going to try to pass this right needle down through this natural stitch. You're going to pass it down through, but when you're passing it down through, make sure you've caught this stitch so that it can sneak onto your needle, okay, your right needle, and you're going to slip it off your left and pull it a little tight. Let's try it again. Going in through the front to the back, and it's nice X, going around, holding the yarn, pushing. You have it in the back, but now you're going to kind of bring it in the front, put it through that natural sort of hole, but as you see there, I don't know if you can see it, but your yarn that you just put over is there for your right needle to hook over and down, and now it's on your needle and off. Okay. I hope that was clear. Keep going with that row until all of the stitches on your left needle have been completed and are all onto your right needle, and you're going to put that into your left hand, and the needle that was once your right needle will be empty and ready to start the next row. Keep going until you've got some length on your project, and stay tuned for the next video. Will be on how to purl and how to cast off, and that means when you've created some kind of length and you want to end your project neatly, I will teach you how to do that as well. Thanks for watching and take care.